It's late. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone. Messages from people you haven't spoken to in months. Photos of strangers on vacation. Hundreds of faces, all present and not present at the same time. And somewhere underneath all of it, there's a small, hollow ache you can't quite explain. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a long day. Maybe you're tired, maybe it's the time of night, maybe it's just one of those moods that passes by morning. But the real answer is far stranger than that. That ache isn't a mood at all. It's a signal. And it's one of the oldest signals your body knows how to send. Start with a simple comparison. When your body needs food, it doesn't whisper a polite suggestion. It sends hunger, an unmistakable physical pull that gets harder to ignore the longer you wait. When your body needs water, thirst does the same thing. These aren't feelings your brain came up with on its own. They're alarms, built in by evolution, designed to make sure you don't forget something your survival depends on. So here's the question worth sitting with for a moment. What if loneliness works exactly the same way? A psychologist named Cacioppo spent much of his career studying loneliness, and what he found reshaped how scientists think about it. Cacioppo argued that loneliness isn't simply an emotion that happens to you. It's a biological alarm, as old as hunger, as old as pain, and its job is to tell you that something essential is missing. Not food, not water, connection. To understand why your body would need an alarm for that, you have to think about the world your ancestors actually lived in. Not a world of cities, or phones, or strangers passing by in crowds. A world of small bands, a few dozen people at most, where every single member of the group mattered to your odds of staying alive. If you were separated from that group, even briefly, the danger wasn't abstract. No one to watch for predators while you slept, no one to share food during a bad season, no one to help if you were injured or sick, or simply too slow to keep up. Isolation in that world wasn't an inconvenience, it was a 5-alarm emergency. So evolution did what it does best. It built a warning system, a feeling sharp enough and uncomfortable enough that it couldn't be ignored. One that would push a person back toward the group long before isolation became fatal. That feeling is loneliness. And according to Cacioppo, it has barely changed since. Here's where it gets stranger though, because this alarm doesn't just live in some vague emotional part of your brain. It runs through the same wiring your body uses for physical pain. A researcher named Naomi Eisenberger ran a series of brain imaging studies built around a simple idea. What happens inside the brain when someone feels socially rejected? In one well-known version of her work, participants played a simple ball-tossing game while lying inside a brain scanner. At first, everyone played together. Then, without warning, the other players, who weren't real people at all, just part of the experiment, stopped passing the ball to the participant. Just left them out. The participants knew it was just a game. They knew, on some level, that it didn't matter. And yet their brains lit up in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, a region also activated by physical pain. The same region that fires when you stub your toe or burn your hand, fired when someone simply stopped including them in a game of catch. Your brain, in other words, doesn't draw a clean line between a social wound and a physical one. Being left out doesn't just feel bad in some metaphorical sense. At a neural level, it can register as a kind of injury. Which raises another question. If loneliness is an alarm, and being excluded can register like pain, what happens when that alarm doesn't switch off? In the world your ancestors lived in, the alarm had an obvious solution. Feel lonely. Move back toward the group. Alarm resolves. The system worked because isolation was usually temporary, and the fix was usually available. But a researcher named Julianne Holt-Lundstad looked at what happens when that fix isn't available. When loneliness becomes chronic rather than temporary. She combined data from dozens of long-term studies covering hundreds of thousands of people and looked at how social isolation related to overall health and lifespan. What she found was striking. Chronic loneliness was linked to a higher risk of early death, a risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, higher than the risk linked to obesity, higher than the risk linked to physical inactivity. Think about that for a second. An emotional state. Something with no calories, no chemicals, nothing you could point to under a microscope. Carrying a health risk in the same range as a pack of cigarettes a day. That's not a coincidence. That's an alarm that was never designed to run constantly, running constantly anyway. So here's the reframe. Loneliness was never meant to be a permanent condition. It was meant to be a brief, sharp signal, uncomfortable enough to move you, temporary enough not to break you, like hunger before a meal, like thirst before a drink. The problem isn't that you feel it. The problem is what happens when the thing it's asking for never quite arrives. And this is where your phone comes back into the picture. Scroll through it, and on paper, you're more connected than any human being in history. Hundreds of contacts, group chats, photos, comments, notifications. By almost any measure, you are surrounded by people. But the ancient alarm in your chest isn't measuring contacts. It isn't counting followers. It's tuned to something much older. Presence, voice, touch, the specific signals that, for hundreds of thousands of years, meant the group was actually there, actually available, actually willing to help if something went wrong. A name on a screen doesn't fully satisfy that. A message doesn't fully satisfy that. The alarm can register the activity, notice that something resembling connection is happening, without ever fully switching off because the deeper signals it's actually listening for were never part of the exchange. So you can be in constant contact with people all day, every day, and still feel that hollow ache creeping in by the time you're alone in bed. Not because something is wrong with you, but because the alarm is doing exactly what it was built to do. And the modern world rarely gives it the kind of signal that turns it off. Here's the part worth carrying with you. That ache isn't proof that you're broken, or unlovable, or doing life wrong. It's proof that an ancient system, built for small bands of people who depended on each other for everything, is still running quietly inside you, checking constantly whether the group is close enough to keep you safe. It doesn't know about phones, it doesn't know about time zones, or read receipts, or how many people liked your last post. It only knows the one thing it has always known, that being apart from others used to be dangerous, and some part of you has never stopped keeping watch for that. So it's late. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone. And that small hollow ache in your chest isn't nothing. It's the oldest alarm you own, still working exactly as designed, quietly reminding you that underneath everything modern about your life, you're still the same kind of creature who has always needed someone close by.